Hey, Hard Times Guy back again. In the last video, I alluded to the fact that I was going to just speak to my family for a while. Some things I wanted to get on the record for my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. It has nothing to do with antique furniture or going to auctions or any of that stuff. Just some things that they need to learn and they need to think about, and maybe some of you do too, I don't know. But I'm going to be a different Hard Times Guy for a little while. Don't know how long it's going to take, but it's going to take however long it takes. I'm going to do it until I feel like I've finished what I set out to do. And in the last video, I talked about choices, and I'd like to repeat that just for a second. Because the world seems to think that life situations, or what color you are, or where you came from, or how much money you got, or who your daddy was, all that kind of stuff puts you in a box where your destiny's sealed and there's nothing you can do about it. You're either destined for success or you're destined for failure, and where you come from's caused you to be a victim of where you're going, or a benefactor of where you're going. And I'm here to tell you that that's bull. Don't pay attention to that. The choices that you make and the actions that you take on the choices you make have more to do with the outcomes in your life than any other thing. You're not a victim. And you're not blessed and guaranteed success either. But you are magnificently and wonderfully made. And the opportunities in the country that you were fortunate enough to be born in, the United States of America, are unlimited to you, based on how you choose and what you do about it, how disciplined you are. I said that in the last video. I may say it in every video because I want you to understand that. I don't want you going along with this business that you need the government to take care of you, or you need somebody to take care of you because of some bad situation that wasn't your fault, that happened 200 years ago. Don't believe in that. Choices. Making good choices. That's what it's about. Then I talked about maybe making choices that weren't so good because whatever, and stupidity was one of them. And we had a little discussion about, if you were stupid, what could you do? And I didn't say it out loud, but I'm going to this time. I've been stupid in my lifetime. We all have been stupid. If you're watching this and you think, I haven't been stupid, then you're lying to yourself. We've all done stupid things. But we don't have to keep doing stupid things. We can change that. And I ended that last video talking about the hope that we have and not having to be overcome by being stupid. Because we are what we think and how we think. And so if things aren't going the way you want to, you need to start doing something different. Start thinking differently than you do. Think of something better and new. And here in a little bit we're going to talk about the whatsoever things. But before we do that, I want to talk about the Apostle Paul. Hope I didn't scare about half of you off. The Apostle Paul wrote half or more of the New Testament of the Bible. And I choose to believe what the Bible says, but I'm not a preacher, and I'm not here to espouse religion or change your thinking. I think you have to be almost a moron to think that there is no God, but that's not what this is about, so don't get too nervous about that. If you want to think of Paul as an author and a philosopher, because it makes you uncomfortable to think of him as a spiritual man who wrote about his experiences and his belief and his values after he met Jesus Christ. And if that makes you uncomfortable, think some other way about that. But listen to what I say. And Paul was an educated man. And one of the things I like about Paul was, if you listen to the last video and you listen to my short little statement, of which I said was my creed to live by, and I said, play hard, work diligently, love unconditionally. Paul followed that creed. Whatever he was doing, he did it with zealousness. He played hard. And he worked hard. He worked diligently. He worked constantly at trying to achieve what it was that he was about. And he loved unconditionally. He loved the people that he was trying to help and serve. So much that he dedicated his life and finally gave his life for that. And in the beginning, Paul made some bad choices. In fact, on the road to Damascus, where he met Christ and then his life changed, he was going to Damascus for the sake of persecuting Christians. He was going there because there were a group of Christians there that he knew about, and he was going to reveal their existence and their work to the authorities, turn them over to the authorities and have them punished. That's why he was going there. And that's what he had been doing for a good while. And he'd been doing it zealously. That's what he was about. He met Jesus Christ on the road there, and his life took a 180-degree turn. And he spent the rest of his life from that Damascus experience doing the opposite thing. So we could say that Paul, in the beginning, educated himself, prepared himself, and began what he believed to be his life work, doing the exact opposite thing that he eventually ended up doing. So that first part was he made bad choices. He chose the wrong side of the issue. Or you may think he made good choices, and when he switched, he switched to bad choices. But Paul set out and prepared and began his life work doing something totally different than how he ended his life. So he changed in the middle. He began to think differently. And he made changes in his life. I want you to see that, because I don't want you to think that everybody just starts out and it's all perfect, and we start here and we get here and it's just a smooth, steady climb to whatever we want to do. It's not. Some of us have to make drastic changes from where we began. Even though we began with good intentions and thought we were doing the right thing, we realized that change is necessary. And we got to do some things different. I think I said it out loud a few minutes ago. I'm admitting to you, I've done stupid things myself. I had to live and learn and grow and change. And we all do. And I'm saying all this so that you don't think it's too late, that you've come too far, that you've been too stupid, that you've been too bad, that you've been too evil, that you've made too many bad choices to where there's nothing you can do about it now. That's the first thing I want you to think about. It's never too late to begin again. Today is the day that you need to make the best choice you possibly can to devise the best plan you have to get from where you are today to where you want to go, and to act on it. And tomorrow we do it again. We try to make good choices tomorrow and act on them. And life is a series, a succession of making good choices, having the discipline and the courage and the conviction to act on them and build on them till we get from where we are to where we want to be. And it's a journey, one that never ends. I'm 74 years old. I'm still making that journey myself. And I don't expect it to end until I'm gone. Part of what Paul did after he decided to become an apostle and devote his life to furthering the gospel of Christ was he went around and established churches, gathered people around him, shared his experiences with them, helped to guide them and form them and build them into a group, equip them to carry on themselves after he left, and then he went somewhere else and did the same thing again. And these people that he did that with became various churches. And his writings, for the most part, were letters back to these churches. Many of them dealing with problems. In other words, dealing with situations that had arisen since he left, that now word comes to him about, and something needs to be addressed. They need to deal with some problem that their bad choices have created for them. So, for them too, it was a process. And much of our New Testament teachings and doctrine come from he is working with these people about making changes in their life, making good choices. When they make bad choices, recognizing what they are and learning and planning and doing something about it. Today I'm going to read to you from one of these letters. It's called the Letter of Paul to the Philippians. Before I do that, I want to say that this letter, probably more than any other letter that he wrote, is different than the ones I just described to you, because I described these other letters as Paul communicating to churches about problems and teaching them and instructing them, and in some cases rebuking them and telling them what they need to do next because of things that they have done wrong. And sometimes encouraging them and praising them for things that they've done right. But always there's a lesson there for them, and he feels a need to do this. Philippians is not so much like that. Paul wrote to the Philippians from prison. He's been imprisoned by the Roman government for his work. And he's in prison. And he's writing to the Philippians not because he's heard of something wrong going on at the church in Philippi, but he's writing to them just to encourage them, just as their friend, just as someone who loves them. And he wants to tell them some things to uplift them and keep them encouraged. And he does it not because there's a problem, but just because these are people, the people in Philippi, that are his friends, that he knows and loves, and he's trying to encourage them. I'll probably call this video the Whatsoever Things, because that's the main basis for the lesson that I'm going to give you. Paul, we talked about changing our thinking, and he gives these people a list of things to think about, and I call those the Whatsoever Things, and they're found in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. It's pretty much self-explanatory, and I'm going to read that to you in just a minute. But as I prepared for this today, I thought there's some other things here that I can't leave out, because I wanted you to get the gist of who Paul is and who he is to the Philippians and the relationship that they have with one another, because I'm going to close out this video talking about that. So let's look at it for a minute. Philippians chapter 4, and in verse 4 he says, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say, rejoice." Rejoice in the Lord always. In case you didn't hear that, I'm going to say it again. Rejoice. That's what he tells them. He wants them to be rejoicing in what they're doing and who they are. He wants them to have joy and happiness. Why does he want that? He wants that because he loves these people. He loves them. He knows they're living in a difficult time, in a difficult world, and difficult things can happen to them at any minute. So he's saying, rejoice. Rejoice today. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. He's just telling them what I told you. You're children of God. You're blessed. Be happy in it. And then he gives them the whatsoever things. After he says that, he says, finally, brethren. In other words, he's calling them his brothers, his friends, his loved ones. These are the people Paul loves. He says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. He gives them a list. He says, when you're thinking about something, give it this test. Does it fall into one of these categories? If it doesn't, don't waste your time with it. And we should do that too. We should apply this test to the things that we think about. And we want the end result to end up being things that are true, things that are honest, things that are lovely, things that are pure. That's what we're after in our lives. Things that are of good report. We don't want to think about junk. We don't want to think about evil. We don't want to think about trouble and turmoil and chaos. No. We want our thoughts to move us toward these things. I told you this, and I told you this about Paul in the Philippians, because one of the choices that you make, that we all make, one of the most important choices that we make in our journey toward our pursuit of happiness, our pursuit of our goals, of our being, of our accomplishing what it is we're trying to do here in this life. One of the most important choices that we make is, who do we associate ourselves with? Who do we trust? Who do we want to emulate? Who do we know has our interest at heart? Making those choices about who those people are some of the most important choices that you make. And there's the diametric opposite of that too. We can say, who are the people who we don't want to influence us, or whose influence am I going to disregard? And I'm telling you that more than likely, the people that love you the most are your parents, your brothers and sisters, your grandparents, and your children. They're the ones, when they're trying to help you, when they're trying to tell you something, when they're trying to instruct you, and when it may feel like they're trying to interfere with what it is you're doing or what it is you want, they're the ones that are doing it because they love you. They don't have anything to gain. They're not after something for themselves. They're after something because of you and that they love you. So you need to think about that. Seems like I've preached today. I'm not a preacher. I tried to be a teacher for about 25 years. Taught young people in Sunday school. Not a preacher. In fact, I'm going to tell you a little story and then I'm going to end this video. I had a friend, his name was Morris Rogers. I'm going to talk about him more one of these days. In fact, one of these days I'm going to talk about Morris and I'm going to tell you what I said at his gravesite. I think I'll just repeat to you what I said at Morris Rogers' gravesite when I was in charge of his final service. But there was a time, Morris and I were friends. Morris had a granddaughter who tragically, as a young lady, I think she was 31, overdosed on drugs and died. Broke Morris and Janet's heart. They didn't have a regular funeral service. They had a graveside service, much like the one Janet had for Morris years later. They had a graveside service, and Morris asked me to come and speak for his granddaughter's service. Morris didn't go to church much. Janet did, but he didn't. Didn't trust religious people much. But he knew I had a relationship with God, and I was the closest thing to a preacher that he trusted to speak at his granddaughter's final rites. So he asked me to do that, and I agreed to it. Never done anything like that before that time, and was a little apprehensive about it, but I knew how much it meant to Morris. And Morris was my friend. Well, it come out in the paper about this young lady's death, and there would be a graveside service, such and such a place, such and such a time, and Luke Mooneyham would be speaking. Come out in the paper like that. A man about my age who I've known since we were young boys. Well known in the community. Over years had owned several different bars. And he owned a bar then on the west side of town, and he was sitting in that bar talking to one of his patrons. They were sitting there at the bar having a conversation, and the one patron was reading a paper, and he said, "Look at this. It says here that Luke Mooneyham's going to preside at a funeral." Is he a preacher? I didn't know he was a preacher. And this man, Rusty was his name, he rubbed his whiskers a little bit and he said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Anything's possible, I guess. His dad was a used car salesman." So he put Rusty, put used car salesman and preachers all in the same category. And if I ever was a preacher, he's right. I was the son of a used car salesman. Sold some used cars myself. So if I ever was a preacher, I guess that's the kind of preacher I was. Till the next time, I'm a hard times guy.